Karen's sisters invited 100 people to camp on my land until my hissing geese showed up screaming. Would you let 100 people pitch tents, blast music, and light bonfires on your land without ever asking for permission? What if the ringleaders wore fake HOA badges and handed out SMOREs like that made it legal? That's what happened on my land last spring. And trust me, I didn't need lawyers or fences to get them out, I just needed my geese. My name's Ben Archer. I'm a widowed dad raising 2 girls and running a modest 25-acre ranch on the edge of Colorado's Roosevelt National Forest. We rescue old livestock, grow native wildflowers, and yes, keep a small army of extremely moody geese named after horror movie villains. The leader? A one-eyed hissing beast named Hannibal. These birds aren't cute. They aren't polite. They were raised by my late wife's grandfather, a Vietnam vet, who believed security came with beaks and volume. And I kept the tradition. They roam during the day, sleep in the barn at night, and can sense trespassers like smoke detects fire. Now, I have very clear signage. Giant wooden "No trespassing" signs, reflective tape, and a gate with a buzzer system. But none of that stopped the Karen sisters. Their names were Wendy and Cheryl Bloom, both in their 50s, faces tight with disapproval, bodies stuffed into pastel cardigans and knockoff hiking boots. They weren't locals. They'd rented a house 2 hills over for sabbatical and community organizing, whatever that meant. Within 2 weeks, they declared themselves leaders of a self-created group called the Greater Echo Hollow Environmental Watch. No one voted for them. No one asked for them. But they printed badges and started marching around telling people what shade of compost bin was acceptable. I first met them when they parked on my easement and left a sticky note that said, "You should be ashamed of the carbon footprint of that smoker." That was a Tuesday. On Friday, I got home late from picking up feed and found the trail gate open. I could hear voices, dozens of them laughing, shouting, music echoing through my pines. I pulled around the bend, headlights sweeping across a full-blown campsite on my meadow. Tents, tarp shelters, a makeshift fire pit, lawn chairs, a projector screen tied between 2 trees. And smack in the middle of it all, Wendy and Cheryl standing like queens of Woodstock, handing out clipboards and code of conduct pamphlets. I parked and stormed down. "What is this?" Cheryl didn't even flinch. "Oh, hello. You must be Ben. We've designated this space as a community rewilding zone for our weekend retreat. It's eco-conscious camping on MY land." Wendy chimed in, "We left you a flyer. And it's not technically your land if it's unfenced and underutilized." I blinked so hard I nearly reset my brain. "I have a deed." "Yes, well, we have intentions," Cheryl sniffed. And that's when I saw a fake Echo Hollow Nature Preserve banner hung on my barn wall. My barn, covering their branding. My jaw clenched. I could have called the sheriff. I could have yelled. Instead, I smiled and said, "All right, have your retreat. But you want to pack up before sunrise." They smirked like they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. Because I didn't just have land. I had a security squad with feathers. At 5:02 a.m., as the first campers stirred, I opened the barn gate. Out came 17 furious geese in full formation, led by Hannibal, who was already hissing like a kettle on the verge of eruption. They didn't waddle. They charged. The first shriek came from a yoga instructor tying her shoelaces. The next from a guy peeing behind a bush who dropped his biodegradable toilet paper and ran with his pants half on. Wendy screamed, "What are these demons?" Cheryl fell into a cooler of almond milk. One goose tore through a tent wall like it owed him money. Another climbed onto the projector stand and knocked it over with a honk that shook the pines. I stood at the edge of the field with my thermos, sipping coffee and letting nature deliver the eviction notice. By 5:17 a.m., the retreat was over. By 5:30 a.m., it looked like a war zone designed by a poultry-themed apocalypse. Tents flattened, trail mix everywhere. At least 3 people barefoot, sprinting down the trail, clutching rolled sleeping bags. One guy dove into his Prius and locked the doors while Hannibal pecked at the bumper like it owed him eggs. And then came twist number 1. See, my oldest daughter, Lily 16, brilliant and a little too tech-savvy had mounted a motion-activated trail cam in a tree 2 days earlier to track local elk patterns. Unbeknownst to everyone, it had live stream capability, and she'd been watching the entire Karen invasion from her phone. When the geese went in, she uploaded the feed titled Unauthorized Hippie Retreat Gets Goosed by Justice to her private server and quietly dropped the link into our town's community Facebook group, which had over 4,000 members. By sunrise, it had spread like wildfire. The comments poured in. Those birds are better security than the HOA ever was. Is that Cheryl? I thought she moved after the compost protest of 21. Ben's land. Ben's birds. Ben's rules. But Karen wasn't done. At 8 a.m., after most of the retreaters had fled, Cheryl came stomping back up my driveway in mud-stained socks and a knit shawl ripped at the shoulder. Her face was blotchy with rage and goose spit. "You'll pay for this," she shrieked. "You've harassed a peaceful gathering." "You trespassed," I replied, calm as ever, "on private property, with 100 uninvited people. After I warned you." Wendy limped behind her, holding a clipboard with a single wet flyer flapping off the back. "You think this is funny?" she snapped. "No," I said, sipping coffee. "I think it's legal." Twist number 2 hit, right, then flashing red and blue lights from down the road. Deputy Morgan rolled up with 2 officers, both of whom I knew from local community events. Cheryl started screaming before they even got out of the cruiser. "This man set birds on us. He endangered human life." Deputy Morgan stepped out slowly, surveyed the mess, and tipped his hat. "Ben, morning." Then he looked at Cheryl. "Ma'am, we've received a formal complaint against you. Multiple neighbors filed noise and trespassing reports. And we also have a live stream of you and your group on Ben's property, ignoring posted signage." Her mouth dropped open. "And then there's the whole goose incident," he added deadpan, "which we reviewed. Good footage. Real National Geographic stuff." "I have rights," she barked. "Not on someone else's land without permission," he replied, when he tried to hand over a retreat permit printed from some website. Deputy Morgan barely glanced at it. "This isn't even a county form." Cheryl was formally cited for trespassing, property disruption, and unauthorized group assembly on private land. She tried to argue, when he tried to cry, but the deputy already had a printed copy of the live stream screenshots thanks to Lily's fast fingers. They were escorted off the property, in front of neighbors who'd gathered at the fence with lawn chairs and popcorn. And the sheriff's department? They added the Echo Hollow Watch Committee to their fraud alert list. No HOA, no authority. No more retreats. A week later, the property they rented was pulled from the platform. The owner left a very public review. "These women tried to turn my cabin into an illegal campground. They got goosebombed. 1 star. I didn't press charges. I didn't need to, because sometimes nature does the talking." That spring, I added a new carved sign to the barn gate. Burned in by hand, letters thick and proud. "Private land. Protected by beak and law." And every spring since, Hannibal leads the morning patrol with his usual vengeance. We call it the Great Goose Parade. And the locals? They show up with coffee to watch. So I'll leave you with this. If someone invites 100 people to your land without asking, is it wrong to let a few hissing geese explain the law? True or false, sometimes justice honks louder than words. The end.